Welcome to our research video presentation. Today, I will introduce you to the hidden costs of textile production. As part of daily life, every day we wear jeans, t-shirt, and several clothes. But have you ever thought about the environmental cost behind them? Globally, we produce over 120 million tons of textile every year. To put you in context, this is enough to cover the city of Zurich under 2 meters of clothes. Around 80% of our textiles come from just two fibers, cotton and polyester. But both have some environmental consequences. Although cotton textiles come from a renewable natural source, the plant is thirsty for water, dependent on pesticides and the use of fertilizers. Nitrogen fertilizers produces emissions of nitrous oxide, a greenhouse gas almost 300 times worse than CO2. And polyester, made from fossil fuels, meaning that depends on a non-renewable resource, and during the washing stage, it releases microplastics polluting rivers, oceans, and more. So, whether it's cotton or polyester, both fibers carry heavy environmental baggage. So how can we find out how much this baggage weighs? We use a tool called Life Cycle Assessment, or LCA. Think of LCA as following a product story from the very beginning to the very end. Now, to follow the product story, we need to know how the product was made and what resources were needed to make it. So first, it'll introduce you the journey of a t-shirt. First, the fibers grown in nature or made by chemical reactions. These fibers are grouped together to form yarn. The yarn is grouped and interwoven in different patterns to form the fabric. This fabric can be colored, bleached, and printed in a process called wet treatment, which leaves the fabric ready to be cut and assembled into our t-shirt. Now we can collect information to prepare the LCA, such as the amount of fertilizer, water used, diesel for transport, or electricity consumption in machines, but also the emissions released at different stages. And here's something we don't usually see: energy consumption. Making textiles is extremely electricity hungry. Therefore, its environmental impact is highly dependent on the electricity energy sources. So, the same t-shirt can have higher or lower CO2 emissions, depending on where and how it was made. But we have many other indicators, so let's try to make it simple and speak in a common term for us: money. So, we will translate all this impact indicators in economic value. So how do we calculate this? We use a method to calculate the external cost of a product. This external cost adds up all the environmental impacts of different categories and asks, what would be the economic consequences of this on human health, ecosystems, and resource consumption? And we realize something. Every time we buy a t-shirt, the consequences can be up to 4 times what it costs to produce it. But we have good news. 75% of these costs can be reduced by transitioning to renewable sources. And improving our consumer behavior can be even better, but that depends on each one of us. And there is more. New alternatives based on biopolymers from waste are now being developed. These alternatives can replace the use of polyester, reduce the impact of microplastics, and decrease the use of fossil materials. Remember, polyester emerged as a solution to certain limitations of cotton and now accounts for 55% of textiles. However, it is now time to continue with the evolution and use of new fibers that minimize the new problems arising from the use of polyester. Want the full story? You can find it all right here. And follow us if you are interested in discovering how sustainable production and consumption looks like.